Okay, so we had a conversation. Some of it was video and some of it was text writing about motorcycles.
Yes.
And after the fact, now that we've had the conversation, I think it would be good for us to talk about the experience a little bit and just kind of reflect on how it went. So, and I just want to make sure that this microphone is here so that it can pick us up. Okay, so first, what was going on in your head? And I'll model and answer the question too, but what thoughts were you having as you were reading some of the things that I said, which were different from your perspective, or just listening to some of the recordings of what I was posting?
Yeah, I think in hindsight, looking back at it, and actually in doing it, I think one of the things that really came up for me was that this is a conversation and it was a back and forth, but because it was, I'll use the word disjointed, I was able to stop and repeat and really try to take in that place where you are coming from and understand it. Initially when it came out, and I think I did two videos, like I tried to record one prior to listening to you, then one after listening to you. And the one after listening to you, it was a little bit of a struggle speaking, because I kept thinking, really trying to think about what you were saying and how to respond to it. And I think in a live, really fast back and forth, I don't know if we're I know we're not. It's not as easy, but I don't know if we're always capable of even truly listening to the person. I mean, we're formulating, because there's a disagreement. I'm formulating what I'm going to say. I'm thinking of all the logic of what I'm saying, why it makes sense to me. But in that moment, because it's a difference, am I really listening and understanding? So that disjointed, the separation, I really found helpful. And I think I said to you at one point, thinking of like there's discourse between folks in history and letters and stuff, and just this fact that if you think of 200 years ago, I'm going to send a letter to somebody, it might be a week before it got there, and then they're going to read it and respond, then weeks before I get it back, and so there's a long time between the thought that had to go into that to make sure you're conveying and make sure you're listening and make sure you're responding. And maybe there is something about that time and space, but how do we embed that now when everything's so immediate?
Sure. And hearing you say that makes me think about like even a totally different experience, a totally different skill. Like when I do a workout, I'm watching a video and the instructor takes you through something with a weight, like you have to like raise a weight above you or below you or up to the side, and the first like 8 repetitions so slow, so that you can kind of develop a feel for it and practice it before you actually do the hard work. And then once you jump in and do like the actual difficult work and the repetitions that are faster or like a little bit more challenging, you've developed that muscle memory. So hearing you say that, it sounds like the same thing. So when we practice these conversations, kind of the way Jefferson and Hamilton did, we're at the back and forth, slow, waiting for the response to come in before responding. You have an opportunity to develop that muscle memory so that when you get into an actual conversation with someone, it feels more natural to actually do some effective listening where you're not thinking about the next thing you're going to say. You're actually trying to make sure you understand. So that makes me also think about like, well, what would happen if Mr. Shazar and I were in a conversation over something that's a highly emotionally charged topic? Because in fairness, yes, we shared some experiences, but this topic wasn't that emotionally charged. So it was pretty low risk. Mm-hmm. So that makes me think about like how that would impact me if I were in a conversation with you over something in person that maybe was a little bit more controversial.
Yeah, even as that whole idea of practice, as you were saying, that really resonated. I don't think we think of conversation as something that we would ever practice. I mean, we've practiced our entire life. As soon as we learn to formulate sentences, there's some form of back and forth. So why would we need to practice it? But it really is that I think there's the two elements you brought in. It's this idea of controversial. Controversial means there's two very different viewpoints, and we've embedded ourselves in one of them. Otherwise, it wouldn't be controversial, right? We're just like, oh, that's interesting. Right. But the reason there's tension or controversy is because we've embedded ourselves in a viewpoint. So we have this understanding of it, and then in doing so, it really always feels like, I want to make sure you understand. Mm-hmm. You got to understand my point. Mm-hmm. And you're saying, well, and so where is that place where you've practiced really trying to listen to the other person? And I think what was interesting in this conversation were the personal experiences.
Right.
And a lot of times I don't think that's our context. That's where we develop our thinking. It comes from, that's part of it, right? And so really trying to understand person by person where that is. I mean, you have to listen to each person, even though it might be the same discourse, it's a new person, and understanding where they're coming to have a productive conversation. I think that's really a tough skill. And it's definitely something that, even as we did it, that idea of practicing it is like, we really do need to take time to go back in a safe place, right? Not like, oh, here's a tough conversation. I'm going to think of practice it means you're doing it in that place where you're wait, okay, I screwed that up. Let's talk about it.
Sure.
Feedback, right?
Sure.
I find this very interesting that, something I probably took very much for granted, a conversation, like really just getting into the concept.
Yeah. All right. So I love asking this question because when you already know that you disagree with someone, very frequently you'll jump into the conversation thinking that this is going to be a debate or that this is going to be an argument, but it wasn't. So how did it feel different for you than a debate or an argument?
I think when we use the words debate and argument, there's this supposition that there's and I'll make it very overly simplified, a winner. Mm-hmm. Okay? And in this case, it really, in the end of the day, like you said, it was kind of a low risk. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. We are not going to make the decision whether motorcycles exist or don't exist in this mm-hmm. world. It was just a conversation of whether or not for you or mm-hmm. for me or how I would approach or see somebody, how we would handle this topic. When we bring in the word debate and argument, there's this idea that, okay, there's got to be a win. And we didn't have that. So, I think it's really interesting because there's the varying levels, right? So we have to come to a conclusion mm-hmm. because something has to move forward. Therefore, some idea has to rise to be it. And then I think we bake in this idea of a collaborative solution. And whereas I like that idea, too many times collaboration is a mix of ideas that don't necessarily solve the problem. And that's the hard part, disagreeing and coming to something that gets to a solution of the problem and not just collaborating so much that we both get a little bit, but then we never really get to a solution that gets there. And again, back to a skill, I think that's a skill. And that's where, patience, it's kind of funny. I was listening to a song this morning, and it was a very strange song by a group I know, and it really was almost like a dialogue of the singer and the band saying, like, slow down and do good solutions as opposed to rushing through. And funny enough, the band was Rush. I'm like, this is such a strange song that I never heard before. And now, for some reason, I'm thinking of it now, but it's like that idea of, I guess, I'm not sure, like somewhere in patience or understanding, but again, it's a skill. I think I just rambled on, but there's a whole bunch of information.
First, I'm a huge Rush fan, so I love hearing that. Secondly, and the students know because I talk about it all the time. Secondly, I'm thinking about what I appreciated about this and how it felt differently is that it's very similar to what you said, but we were okay with disagreeing. And I think often when you get into an argument, sometimes it's because it's emotionally charged and you believe so passionately in your side. Students are learning about religions, and often religion is very emotionally charged because everything you believe is connected to your thinking and connected to your actions. And so you feel like you need to hold on to that and defend it. So if you hear someone with a completely different perspective, already you feel like you are not on the same page and you are enemies, so to speak, even if it's just ideological enemies. So it makes me think about this experience feeling different because our outcome was like what you described. We wanted to come to an understanding, not that we wanted to individually win. But I start to think then, how do we apply that in these emotionally charged situations where we take that skill that we've developed doing this experience where it was very low risk, and put it in a high risk situation? Would I be able to flip that switch and be able to say, the outcome for this conversation is not that I'm going to win or defend my life and the things I do and the things I believe, but I'm going to be heard. I'm going to share my experiences, my beliefs, my understanding with this other person who may not have understood it prior to this conversation. And then the reverse is true. All the assumptions I may have had about someone who disagrees with me, I am willing in this moment to deconstruct all of that and to just get to a point where I know where this person is coming from. So that's kind of where my head goes when I think about that. What did you like about it?
Well, first, this is a crazy year and there's so many things going on. I kind of liked slowing down and just having this different conversation. So first of all, thank you for engaging me in this. But, I think for me, there was some realization, and, I like learning, and I like learning about myself. So one of the things was going back and forth. I don't like being on video. I don't like having this like permanent stamp out there of whatever it is, for whatever personal reason I have for that. I couldn't even explain it to you. Like, I'm good with just, kind of going along. But I did enjoy like seeing and hearing you. I think especially in the age of, the last 12 months of masks, so much has been talked about. That idea of seeing somebody, the inflection of them, how they look. I've told people I write Pulitzer Prize winning texts. They're so amazing and articulate and thoughtful and have perfect context. And then somebody reads them and I'm like, I have no idea how you took that the other way. All I'm trying to say is, like, in my mind it was very clear. And then obviously when somebody else read it, I'm like, oh man, that wasn't clear at all. So being able to see and maybe it's a part of this year, but kind of getting a sense of what's behind the words, and then going back and forth with the text, I was able to think of those things, and then I think maybe it helped me slow down and read the text and really, because I wasn't just reading, I had some of this visual of, like, even your pace when we talk and we kind of slow down at a point, we really start to understand what the person, and even I'm trying to wow, that's really something coming through from them. So I enjoyed the back and forth. But what I think beyond that, what I really enjoyed was really kind of honestly civil conversation of a disagreement. And I think there's a struggle, maybe it's because I'm older I see it, or maybe because I recently saw a poll about Republicans, Democrats, and ideology, and they portrayed it over the last 30 years, and it just, it once was this nearly overlapping distribution, and now it's very far apart. It feels like everything is an argument, as opposed to, the word civil discourse, and just like, well, we're not going to agree on this one, and that's okay. So having something where it just didn't feel like this battle was also enjoyable.
Yeah, I would honestly say I feel the same way about everything, for the same reasons that you just said. I think even for me, I like the opportunity to just slow down and talk about something that I know I'm going to disagree with you, because we already told each other ahead of time that we had different perspectives. And I didn't feel pressured to be to write a Pulitzer Prize winning text. I didn't feel pressure to convince you at all. I felt like this was just nice because it's nice. It's a human. I think it's a human feeling. It's normal for humans to want to be understood and to share about themselves. And even though it's uncomfortable on video, for me it's not, because I've been doing it for so long. Because I've been doing remote learning for so long, I'm just getting used to seeing myself on video, and it's fine. But like the students can relate, they do not like to have the camera on them at all. And if given a choice, they will have the camera off. Some of the students, you guys will record your voice, but it's so much more comfortable to be detached. But in this regard, what you're missing out on is that human element, to actually see your facial expressions, and we call them nonverbal communication, to see what your eyes are doing. And like in the videos, it's nice because you can take your mask off and you can actually see facial expressions, which we're missing out on. And I dislike the fact that I can never see my students' facial expressions. So that was nice. I really appreciated that. In what ways was this hard?
I don't know if I'd classify it as hard, but I think things that made me think is what I'm going to kind of go with. Like, it did make me slow down. It did make me think. It did make me wonder. I mean, I did play it back in my mind. I think in one of the responses, I tried to relay it back to my son, and right now it's very directive with him. He's very young. Like, touch the stove, it's hot, you're going to burn. That's really easy. But at some point, this idea of, where I portrayed as personal choice and freedoms, he's going to start making. And then how am I going to look at it? Because all of a sudden, I'd be more in that situation where there's, you have an older son and you're getting some difficult, things. Like, how am I really going to feel at that point in time? Am I going to be true to these ideas that I think I have right now? How embedded are they in that idea of real value that I truly hold, or will it change because now it's different? And so just kind of thinking through those, and where will I be? And for one thing, I think it was fun having this because it did make me think of those things. Like, do I really, really believe this? If I was you and I was in your situation, would I really still believe this? And then I said, when I think of my son, who's crazy, but I think as he get older, he'll realize that if he jumps off a roof, it could be bad, as opposed to just thinking I'm jumping off the roof. Will he have greater sense and I'll have greater trust in him, or will I just look at him like he's this crazy kid and I can't let him do anything? And I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch, but hopefully this experience is something I remember, and it causes me to continue to reflect that, there is this, I do believe that people make choices. And, it's funny because I was him when I was a kid, and even some conversation with my parents, they're like, you didn't listen to anybody. Not in an evil way, but you were just like, that's cool, I'm going to go do this. You guys have fun. Like, at some point I'll tell you about when I was probably Henry's age, about 6 or 7, and I somehow got on a boat and went water skiing without anybody knowing. And I'd never been water skiing in my life, and I just told him, I go, yeah, I do this all the time. And I was literally in the middle of the lake.
When you were 6?
Yes, and I might have been 7, like literally in the lake with the skis and the thing, and they were just like, go! And that was the first time ever. And that's one of those things where why not?
No fear.
Yeah, I called it more of a sense of adventure, but it did, whatever. So, but like, I lived through that and I thought it was great. And now I look back and think of all the crazy things that could have happened and gone wrong. But so I think my challenge is, that reflective piece in me of where is this going to go? I mean, it's easy to have this belief right now, and whether we think we have a lot of information to feed it, it's still myopic. It's still through our experience and our vision, or whatever you want to call it. But then there's all this other stuff, And if you start viewing it through these other things, will you be in those situations? And, you know, going back to that idea of if you hold this as a moral or a value, an unrelenting one, and how tight you hold on to it, will you really apply that everywhere, or is that really kind of more flexible and situational? So I think that's what I found challenging, just trying to think through, you know, is it motorcycles? Yes, no. I think that's a little too simple. I mean, it's easy to start there and then branch out, but
Yeah.
there's definitely things around it.
Yeah. So something that's very difficult for me personally is effective listening in conversation. And I think I'm good at it now, but it's because of all of the muscle memory that I've had to develop. I get very excited in conversations. I use my hands a lot. I get very animated. Part of that is because I'll hear something you say, and then I'll say, oh, I want to add. I want to make a connection, without really allowing you to continue expressing what you want to share. So I can completely derail a conversation, not because I want to make it all about me, but because I'm so excited to make that connection. So it is challenging for me to demonstrate effective listening. But because I practiced it so much in these kinds of scenarios, I know to wait. Even if I'm excited, wait. It's hard for some of us whose brains jump around like everything's a web as opposed to like something linear, because my brain operates like a web and everything's connected. It's not in any kind of order. So when I heard something that I want to make a connection to, sometimes I actually have to let that go because I may not remember where it is in the conversation. And you know, you're not like flagging things in live conversation with sticky notes.
Right.
Or taking notes. So I have to be relaxed enough to say, you may not get to make that connection because you might not remember. And that has to be okay.
Yeah.
Because what's more important is that you understand where this person is coming from. And if you take it off into a tangent, it may never come back. So that's something that's very challenging for me. I don't know that it was challenging so much for this exercise just because of the nature of it. But if it's challenging for me now, like I really actually have to concentrate on that. I think something that really helps too are those sentence stems, to be able to say, when I heard you say, and then fill in the blank, then it gives me kind of an anchor to be able to make sure that I'm actually showing that I'm listening. So that's been helpful for me. And that is not, oh, I think that's it. I think we've finished. Is there anything else that you want to say about this experience?
No, yeah, I say no, but then, yeah, I'm going to say something. You know, I think going into it, I thought it would be interesting, and in all honesty, the beginning of it, I'm like, oh, this will be a good, you know, it stays within the realm of education, it's helping out, this is great, and I needed something that wasn't staring at a spreadsheet all day long and all the other things that we're doing this year, or that I'm doing this year. And then as we got into it, you know, I learned or you know, relearned or paused, you know, it got me to think again. And you're so right. When you're in a conversation, you know, you want to add to that moment of the person. And one of the ways I've tried to stop myself from doing that, and I by no means think I'm very good at it yet, is I try to remind, like it's not always that interesting. Oh, I got to tell you something. Like, it's just not that interesting. Let the other person, you know, talk and finish and get it all out, and then, you know, like, you're not missing this critical moment in your life. Like, oh my God, I had the most important thing to say and I didn't say it. Like, it's just not. You know, if you really have that Pulitzer Prize winning quote, like, go ahead and get it out. But for the most part, you're not really, you know, making this you know, incredible difference you think you are. We just have this need to I think that I like that word, like, connect, like that idea of connecting to what the person says, that shared experience. Like, it's a way of, you know, we shake our head and we do things to say, yeah, I get you, I agree with you, and that's another way of doing it. And I'm going to keep talking because I think you want to say something. I'm going to see how long I can get you to hold on right now. But, I think that was what that ability to kind of reflect on that and think through that. And, I think in the last 12 months, we just haven't had a lot of interaction. So it was just fun to go through something like this. So thank you.
Agree.
And
thank you
the kids.
so much, because essentially what we did was we modeled the skill that we're hoping, our students can develop. But also this piece was important too, to be able to stop and reflect back and say, how did it go? Which, how often do you do that? Do you reflect on the experience of a conversation? So again, slowing it down and having the opportunity to do this is super, it's a great learning experience for us as well as for the students.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.